So, our first speaker is Professor Gregor Starc. Dr. Starc is an associated professor at the Faculty of Sport, University of Ljubljana. His main research interests are children's somatic and motor development, physical activity, and the topics related to the children's active lifestyles and health. He is the manager and principal investigator of the Slovenian National Surveillance System for Somatic and Motor Development of Children and Youth, SlowFit, and has been serving as contemporary advisor of the World Health Organization in the field of childhood obesity since 2007. He also serves as the president of the Sloven Anthropological Society and has been serving as the leader of the Active Healthy Kids Network for Slovenia. Today, this topic is very interesting to me and very crucial, especially during these days. The presentation title is No Child's Land, unfortunately, Shrinking of Children's Roaming Space and its Implication for Physical Activity. And I'm honored to announce Professor Starc.
Thank you very much, Selçuk. I'd like to first greet everybody in these difficult times. I would rather be with you in person, but you know how it goes these days. So you see, I'm wearing my headphones because in the next room, my 3 children have school, so they are allowed. Yes, I've been in Cappadocia, actually. I love it. I've been in Nevşehir. I lived in Nevşehir for 2 weeks, and it was a very good experience. One of the nicest places in Turkey that I've seen. So thank you. Can I now share my screen?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we can begin.
Yes.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay, that's my topic today. Well, in these days we see that we are being confined at homes, and this presents a really big problem. Not only physically, especially mentally. That's why in Slovenia we are, the minute it started, we started our campaign Fight Corona with movement. So we started communicating with schools, with parents, with all the institutions, and proposing recommendations for physical activity at home during isolation, etc. So we have been very active. But of course, our children, many of them are living in similar conditions every day because they really don't move as much as they should. And their roaming space, so this is the space where they walk independently around home, has shrinked a lot. At the beginning, I would like to say that, of course, our environment changed in the last, especially in the last 50 years, a lot. So the lifestyle of children have changed. You can see children playing in the streets decades ago, but today, if you go in the big cities to the streets, or even in small towns on the streets, you don't see children playing anymore. Or you can see them in rare occasion, or you can see them in some special places where they still do that. Of course, we know that our life has changed, but we are not really certain how much it changed. Why? Because physical activity hasn't been a problem before. It started to be a problem in the last maybe 20, 30 years. Before, we were not talking about this because nobody was even recording what the physical activity of children is, because there was no problem with it. Children were playing all the time. They were active, they were outside, they were playing outside, or they had to work. If they were kids from farms, you know, from the rural areas, they had to work in the fields. In some countries, agricultural countries, children still do that. In some countries, unfortunately, children have to do a lot of hard labor, you know. But in most of the countries in the developed world, we can see that these environmental changes, our influence on the organization of space basically changed the lifestyles of children. So where did we go? We went from street kids to parked streets. Our streets are now used by cars, our backdoor yards, they are often used for parking your car, and parents basically don't allow children to play there because they could damage the car, break the window or do something like that. Of course, we know that we changed that, but we are very lousy at fixing it. We are really doing what? We are building playgrounds. We are organizing all kinds of activities, sporting activities, clubs, NGOs. Everybody's working on that. Some businesses are opened for that, special businesses. This is nothing new. So in the last 30 years, this has become a big industry, how to make children active, but not outside, not independently. Everything is orchestrated. So we are basically producing generations of dependent children. So their physical activity depends on us adults and depends on the on what the society has to offer. It doesn't depend on their own agenda, or they are not the ones who are organizing their time anymore. They are not the ones who are planning things. They are not the ones who are following their needs or their wishes. They are the ones who are following our guidelines, basically. And this is something which troubles me a lot. These days, we can understand that parents are becoming much more careful with children than they used to be before. Of course, the traffic has increased. Yes, of course, it was much safer in regard of traffic 40 years ago, when there were not as many cars on the streets as there are today. But can this really be a good reason for a child to be kept indoors, inside, under control, under surveillance? Is it not better to teach the child how to behave in this environment? Of course, accidents happen and will happen, and even 40 years ago, accidents did happen. So children were also being hit by cars. They did break their legs and arms, and they had the share of scratches and bumps, and this is natural. This is something what we call life, basically. And we are just trying to cut away the dangerous parts by isolating children in their homes. You can see this girl here, you can see her with her phone, she's isolated on her couch. Many children are isolated, even if they are connected to other children, they are still alone. And of course, being surveilled does not mean being safe. It means being safe in the short run. So if you sit on the couch, there's a slim possibility that something will happen to you. If you walk the stairs, yeah, you might fall. If you go outside, you might fall off your bike. Or you might get in quarrel with a friend, and you fight and you get smacked. Of course, it's safer to be on the couch. But on the long run, this is not a very smart solution, because this means we are basically raising inactive people. So inactive children are very, very likely to be inactive adults, and active children are also very likely to be inactive adults. So we have no guarantee that an active child is going to stay active. Okay, the chances are bigger than with inactive child, but still there is no guarantee. We know that, and this is a problem. And there's also a problem that there are hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people who are working on selling leisure time to children, inactive leisure time to children, and there are not very many experts and people out there who are selling active lifestyle. So if you look at the capital behind one and the other industry, there's a huge gap, and we are fighting a very unjust fight, it's David against Goliath, you know. But I think that we have a chance at it, you know, because maybe with education we can change things. So parents, we are often confusing children's safety with control, you know, and the worst thing that can happen to a parent is that if a child has free time, the child doesn't know what to do with it, you know. So he comes for advice. Dad, what should I do? Mom, what should I do? They come to teacher, what should I do? You know, this is a very good sign that we have an unindependent child. So this is a child who is not able to act on his own in regard of choosing activity in their leisure time. Well, we of course try to assess physical activity. We do. I've been working in this field for many years now, and I'm still not happy with it. You know, we try to assess, we try to measure things objectively. We try to use all kind of gadgets to do it. You know, but we are still not very good at it. We are getting better, but we are still not very good at it. If we take 100 tools, we get 100 different results. So if you take 5 different devices, you will get 5 different readings. If you take 5 different questionnaires, you will get 5 different results. So it's very challenging to have comparisons made, you know. And the next speaker is going to present you a comparison, but it was a laborious work, you know. It's not an easy task to do in these days. So basically, we are focusing on what children do, how often, etc. But on the other hand, we are forgetting one thing, and this is the thing I would like to talk about, and this is the roaming space. What we did for 2 years now, we've been doing ethnographic field work. So we've been talking to families. The rule is the family has to have at least 3 generations, so grandparents, parents, and children. If possible, it's very good if they have 4, so grandparents, grandparents, parents, and children. And we've now gathered data from over 100 families, and this means that we were talking to them about their experience with outdoor play when they were children until age 11. So what were you doing until age 11? How independent you were, what kind of games you were playing, you know, and how far from home did you move independently without parental supervision. So we today now that we know the patterns of physical activity, we know what children are doing, you know, but we simply seem to ignore the loss of their environment, the environment that we adults stole from them. So our families are scattered throughout Slovenia, from all the parts of Slovenia. I don't want to talk about this being a nationally representative sample because it hasn't been stratified. But you know, we are just talking to usual families with their histories. And what we see here is a chart of the raw data. So you can see grandfathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, grandmothers, fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. And you can see free roaming distance on your left, you know. And if you look at these black dots, these are individuals. So there are over almost 400 individuals involved in this. And the red dots are the median values of each group. So you can see that the highest values were achieved by grandmothers, surprisingly, and grandfathers. Of course, grandmothers and grandfathers are not very numerous, obviously, because most of the families don't have grandmothers and grandfathers anymore because they died. So a small sample, and you know, if you have a few big values, then the median goes up. But you can see, especially from grandfathers onwards, you know, that the roaming space of children was declining all the time. So, but what we can see that, for example, there were still differences between grandfathers and grandmothers. So grandmothers were not allowed to go away from home further than grandfathers, than the male peers at that time. And also in the parents, you can see that fathers had half a kilometer longer distance from home than mothers. But when we look at sons and daughters, we can see that they are basically identical, almost identical. So this means that the children became more homogeneous. And you can see that the spread of results in sons and daughters is the least distributed. So they are very, very compact, very homogeneous. So what we can see from generation to generation, the diminishing of free roaming space. And in the next chart, I use the univariate general linear model, and I try to see what the effect of gender was on roaming space, and I was controlling for age. So because there are huge age differences in grandfathers and grandmothers age group. You have grandfathers who are now 80 or 85, and grandfathers who are 59. So this is a huge time span. Some of them were children when there was a Second World War. And of course there were some restrictions with movement. But I tried to control for this, and this is what came out. So grandfathers had the largest distance. You can see on your right hand side the orange full line. This was the grandfather's circle. But you can see that the difference between grandfather and grandfather, so between father and son at that time, was pretty small. So there was not a huge change in these two generations. So because the life was pretty much similar. Even when grandfathers were children, there was not as much traffic, etc. And you can see grandmothers and grandmothers, they are even closer. But then you can see the first big gap between grandparents and their children, so fathers and mothers. So you can see the blue circles, the distance between blue circles and green circles and orange circles are now bigger. And then we can see another very similar drop between fathers and mothers and sons and daughters. So you can see that the generation of grandfathers was pretty much traditional, but then things started to change. So now we have sons and daughters who are only the masters of space that does not expand more than 1.2 kilometers from their homes. So this was the median value of roaming distance. So you could see that the differences between boys and girls decreased, but in this regard, you can see the gender emancipation in the diminishing of roaming space. So boys and girls today are very similar. So the girls are being very emancipated in Slovenian society. And this is another thing that I did, which is a bit different approach than before. What I did is I took every single family, and within this family, I took grandparents as the reference. So I calculated what was in the single family the percentual difference between grandfathers and their descendants, so fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. So these numbers tell you what was the percentage of grandparental roaming distance. So you could see that grandmothers and grandfathers had much higher percentage. Okay, this is very different data than before, because you are looking at changes within single family. But this tells us that roaming space is non-hereditary. So this means that if a grandparent had a large roaming distance, there was no guarantee that the children would have large roaming distance, or the grandchildren would have large roaming distance. So basically, I haven't studied these patterns in very thorough, because this is actually the first time that anybody except me sees this data. So nobody else saw it before. This is the first analysis that I'm showing now, and you could see that daughters, now granddaughters, cover less than 1/3 of grandparents' area. So their space really shrinked. This means that children today are living basically on satellite locations. They have their home, and then their parents are taking them to practice, to I don't know, language course, to music school, to I don't know where, you know, and they don't master their own environment. But let's take a look. What does this reflect on physical fitness? Because we have physical fitness of the entire Slovenian population. We gather this data every April. So this is the data that you see of 9 to 13-year-olds in Slovenia from 1989 to 2019. Participation rate in all generations is above 95%. So this is the data of above 95% of the entire population of children in Slovenia. And this is physical fitness index. This index is calculated from 8 fitness tests. So we can get then an overview. And we can see that the girls in orange, you know, they really accelerated after 2010, 11, you know, and nowadays they are much more fit than their mothers were. But the boys are still not above the physical fitness of their fathers. So they are still catching up. We've been doing some progress, but we are still not reaching it. So in Slovenia, we have a pretty good situation in regard of physical activity, in regard of physical fitness. But this also means that the roaming space and the outdoor play does not play the crucial role in it. What we do, we have an excellent educational system. So physical education in school is excellent. It's very high level. Teachers are excellent. Our curriculum is great. The schools are very well equipped. They have, every school has 2 gyms, you know, and a lot of programs. So who is doing the work? Mostly the schools. And this is why I don't really trust parents to be in charge of children's physical activity. I will come to this at the end. What I try to emphasize here is that physical activity really has 5 dimensions. We are usually measuring frequency, we are measuring duration, intensity, and type of physical activity. So we usually use these 4 indicators to describe physical activity and assess it. But I think that we should add the 5th dimension, and this is the environment. The consequences of the loss of roaming space are not small. You know, this means that people are no longer they don't know their local environment anymore. They have poor recreational use of local resources because they don't know their environment. They also have poor awareness of local ecological problems. They don't see ecological problems anymore because they don't master the environment. They you know, if it's further than 1.2 kilometers from home, I don't care. And they depend on indoor recreational activities. Okay, every activity is better than none, but you know, outdoor activity has many positive effects on psychosomatic well-being, which indoor activities don't. So there is an extra, there is a plus in being active outdoor. So our 5th dimension should not be ignored. And what I see in other countries, you know, when they have all kind of interventions, physical activity interventions, you know, many times they try to do it by, I don't know, advertising physical activity, telling to parents, you know, okay, you should make your children physically active, and then they try to depend on parents to do it. In Slovenia, we don't do that because we established very fast that this is a lost case, that we cannot depend on parents, because there are so many differences between parents and in knowledge, in their attitudes, that we cannot just leave them to take care of children's physical activity. This is why we are making our schools so strong in physical activity, because we know that if we can change anything, we can do it in schools. And eventually, because children, parents, adults are getting more and more educated, this is going to be transferred to parents, but we are not at that point yet. So this was what I tried to give you today. This is what I tried to emphasize, and this is still an ongoing process of work. So the roaming space is something that intrigues me a lot, and we will do other approaches as well. In this approach, we were just using Google Maps, and the parents and grandparents and children, they had to point out, where their home is and where they go, to which forest or to which location, and then establish it. But there is strength in numbers, so we are continuing with this. So every year we gather around 100 new cases. So this year I'll have 100 new families and better data. And this will give us some insight into the roaming space. And also, because of this, we will be able to produce educational programs in schools, that will educate parents and children, and of course, also the Ministry of Education and Sport. So we will have some, let's say, evidence-based behind all the interventions we will integrate, implement in this regard. So thank you very much for your attention. And if there are some questions or comments, you're free to talk to me. And if you want to contact me, please, this is my mail. If anybody wants to do a similar kind of research, I would be very happy to work with you, maybe even come up with a project for this, and trying to do this internationally. So check the roaming space in different environments, different cultures. That would be something very useful for our knowledge about physical activity of children today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Starc, for your great presentation and very interesting topic. So I would like to ask to the audience first if they have any question or contribution to your presentation. And if they have any, I will give them the speech, give them the chance to ask. Okay, so I have a couple of questions, in fact. Pretty interesting data. At some point, I'm a little bit confused, because like normally when you show the I'm sorry, somebody is just probably, yeah, okay. So when you show the data, especially for the roaming space, from the old time to the current time, so normally the rooming space going down.
Yeah.
Right. But when you show the data, especially for the physical activity level of the female and male students, it's like switching from male to the female.
Yeah.
From boys to the girls.
Yes.
So which pops up in my mind that during your presentation, you also showed like environmental changes equals to lifestyle changes. It is kind of little bit controversy, even though the roaming place is getting narrowed, but female, like girls, being more active,
Yes. Excellent question, excellent observation. I can explain my idea about it. Yeah. Well, when the computer technology came, when the modern technology came to our homes, it was the boys who were the most affected. They were the ones, and males, we are the endangered species today. We are the ones who are being nailed to the sofa or television and computer screens. Not girls, not in the same range. So what happened was the boys stopped but the girls progressed, you know. And this is why also in physical fitness we can see the progress of Slovenian girls in comparison to boys. I don't have data for other countries. I don't know, because there are certain cultural things that influence also that. But when I was a child, my female friends, you know, when we were playing outside, we were cowboys and Indians, you know, and they were nurses, you know, they were waiting there for us, you know, taking care of us when we were injured. Today, if you look at the girls, you know, they're playing football, they're doing everything. I mean, they are mountain biking, they are hiking, they are running, you know, they are allowed to do everything and encouraged to do everything, and they do it. And of course, girls are always a bit more mature than their male counterparts, you know. They are also in a biological sense, you know, they are probably 1 or 1.5 years in front of boys mentally, you know. So they take better care of themselves, and this reflects.
Okay, thank you. I think pretty good explanation, to be honest. I 100% agree with you, especially regarding the usage of the technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have any daughter. I have 2 boys, but like regarding from my experience, I would definitely 100% agree with you.
Yeah, it's. I have 3 boys, and I can tell you, if I wasn't the one watching what they are doing with screens, they would be watching it constantly. You know, but we have very strict rules. You know, you have half an hour per day. So 3 of you, everyone 10 minutes, then go out.
All right. I think Stevo has a question. Dr. Popovic?
Thank you, Selçuk.
Hi, Stevo.
Hi, Gregor. I would like to thank you that you're with us, and I'm really impressed with the presentation, especially with the part with the grandparents. I was really surprised with the data, because I didn't expect something like that, and these kinds of studies are very interesting.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Stevo, these days these are the endangered populations. So
yeah, I know.
We are going, I mean, even this year, we will have a setback with this research, because I'm not allowing the researchers to go to the families, you know, with grandparents. It's too risky. So we will have to postpone it to a later time. Yeah.
I have one question, because I would like to compare it to the people from Montenegro, for example, because we have quite similar background, and when I compare it to the grandparents and especially grandparents from Montenegro, my first expression, because I don't have scientific view, just my personal view, that those people, especially grandmothers, they're sitting at the home and they're not leaving home at all. I don't know, is it the case? Is it the case in Slovenia, or they are much more active?
You mean now, when they are grandmothers?
No, yes.
Or they were children?
I didn't get.
I was comparing grandfathers and grandmothers as children.
As children, okay. I missed that point. This is the reason I was surprised.
But yeah, I understand your question, and I would say that modern grandmothers in Slovenia are being more active than modern grandfathers. I can tell you an example. I was 2 years back. I was with one group of senior females. You know, they were exercising. They just rented one place, one gym in one school, and they had practice every week. You know, and I went there and I talked to them. They were very active, and I said, "Well, bravo, ladies. This is very good. You know, you are very good. You know, practicing all the time." And they said, "Yeah, we are good, but our immobilities, they don't do anything." I said, "What kind of immobilities?" She said, "Our husbands, they don't do anything. They just stay at home." And one of them said, "Well, you know, if I died now and my husband would be left without a wife, and he would want to find another one, if he wanted to post an advertising to finding a woman, he would have to do it in the real estate section. So I'm here in this street. I don't move anywhere." So, you know, but you know, in traditional families, I think it's still the pattern you were describing. So So grandmothers are most traditionally were more sedentary than grandfathers. This is for sure. Yeah.
So this is good way to propose how we will be when we become grandparents.
Yeah.
So it's the proposition is not very well, right? If we are not active at all.
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe if we are lucky, we will have active wives who will push us to be more active. But basically, I think men are neglecting our health. You know, we have this idea that we are good. You know, that at 40 we are the same as at 20. You know, and in the meantime, many things changed. You know, and I think that especially men, we will have to be more critical about ourselves. You know, but this is also psychology. You know. If you look at the psychological experiments, you know, there was one very good one when women and men, they were asked to look in the mirror to see their reflection and then find mistakes on their bodies, you know. And when a female came to the mirror, she said, "Oh, my nose is crooked. My one of the ear is lower than the other one, you know. My hair doesn't look well, you know." So everyone found 10 mistakes on themselves, you know. But then when the males came to the mirror, they started looking at them. "Oh, well, I look pretty good for 40-year-old, you know." So, you know, no criticism at all. So this actually is a problem when it comes to physical activity. You know, we don't have a problem. We are fine as long as we have beer and television.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stevo, and also Gregor, for your explanation. Any other question? I think, like, you know, the importance of physical activity is getting like more like obvious, like year by year. So I don't know if the World Health Organization will do something, like will make some set some rules which is going to be available for all over the world, or the countries would like to take the you know, position, and then they will do something about this physical activity level of the students, like the children. But there should be, like, you know, something has to be done, as you pointed out. And technology, as far as like some studies, some research, and also from my experience, we have to teach the kids to use the technology in a beneficial way. Otherwise, you know, we can use the technology to get them more active, or, like, you know, more passive. So
exactly.
I don't know. There should be some research, some ways to teach the kids to use the, you know, appropriately the technology.
We are just preparing one project in this regard, in which we want to avoid gamification. So because we saw that, you know, trying to make children active with modern technology by gamification doesn't really help, you know, because game is a game. Yes. So you get tired of one game, then switch to another. So you get tired of looking at your data, you know, and at your improvement, and it's not funny anymore. It's no fun. I'll do something else. So I think that the right thing would be what you pointed out, to teach them how to use technology in the right way, you know, to have them be more active and to take responsibility for it. You know, this is the key message. Being responsible for yourself is not just being responsible for yourself. It's being responsible for all the people around you, for your parents, for your family, or for your children. You know, so this is something we will have to work on. Also, World Health Organization is improving in this regard. At least, you know, we now have all kind of documents that include usually nutrition and physical activity. Okay, still nutrition is 10 chapters and physical activity 1, but at least, you know, it started because it's always like, you know, oh, you have to eat healthy to be slim, you know, to avoid being obese. And then at the end, and do some physical activity, you know, and this always becomes something very undefined, you know. And if you look at the the physicians, at the medical doctors, you know, they really don't have competences to give good advices. You know, I was checking the programs of medical studies, you know, and I can see that, for example, in Slovenia, in the 6-year study of medicine, you get 5 hours of physical activity theory, you know. So if you can teach somebody in 5 hours to give good advice about physical activity, I wouldn't do that, you know. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we have some good examples. There are exercise on prescription in Sweden. Also in Slovenia, we have very good, I mean, we have one very good medical institution where three doctors are now working on it, and we are trying to implement this kind of thing all over the Slovenia. So, but this means that you have a team of a doctor, of nurses, of kinesiologists, and they work together on the patient. So, okay.
Hey, thank you, Gregor.
Thank you very much for your attention. You have my mail here, so you are very free to contact me. I have to apologize because I have lectures with my students now, and I will try to return back to the conference as soon as possible. I wish you a very fruitful day, and hope to communicate again in a few hours.
Thank you, Gregor.
Thank you.
Thank you.